Well, hello, my friends. How's it going? Welcome to D4, D&D Deep Dive. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way for building and playing a character in hopes of creating something that is both really fun, but also really powerful to play in-game. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on a particular character that you're thinking about creating, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. I am, so thank you for being here. My name's Colby. I'm afraid we might go over today, so let's just jump right in. If I were to ask you what the toughest subclass in the game was, the subclass that was the hardest to kill, what would your answer be? I'm willing to bet that 90% of people would say the Bear Totem Barbarian. Why? Simple. Barbarians who take the path of the totem as their primal path and choose bear as the option for their level 3 totem spirit get resistance to all damage when they're raging, except psychic. That means half damage on almost everything that a DM is going to throw their way. Couple that with the fact that barbarians are the only class with a D12 hit die, meaning that they get more hit points than any other class. And you've got a character who, without trying all that hard, can be very, very hard to kill. For that reason, a long time ago, when I built my first ever tank character for this channel, I built them around the Bear Totem Barbarian. But if you look at how that character fares for survivability compared to all the other tanks I've done for this channel since, check the video description for a link to the spreadsheets that make those comparisons, you'll notice that the Bear Totem Barbarian comes in dead last for survivability. What the crap? How can that be? Well, I think it's for a number of reasons, actually. First of all, I didn't actually build them to prioritize survivability. I kind of just went, bear barbs are inherently hard to kill, so let's focus on doing damage and exerting some control on the battlefield, and that will be the thing that makes us a tank and makes enemies want to attack us and not our allies. Another reason is that I build all these characters in a lab, right? I pit them against hypothetical combat encounters and assume they all have access to all of their resources during a single round of combat, and that all of the enemies are attacking them and only them during those hypothetical encounters, etc., etc. Perhaps the biggest reason, though, that their survivability doesn't look as good compared to other tank builds is that barbarians tend to attack recklessly, giving enemies advantage on hitting them, and even worse, have a hard time getting into those crazy high armor classes that most of my other tank builds achieve, since you can't cast or concentrate on spells while you're raging as a barbarian, and you need to be raging to get that sweet, sweet damage resistance. And there are a lot of spells in the game that really go a long way to bumping your AC, like the shield spell or shield of faith, haste, etc. So if you combine a good not great armor class with advantage for your enemies to attack you, you end up with a character who's just going to be getting hit a lot more than those uber high AC characters. So even if they're only taking half damage on everything, the Bear Totem Barbarian's survivability tends to be a lot lower than those dedicated tank builds regardless. For all of these reasons, I've been wanting to do a Bear Totem Tank 2.0 for a really long time to see if I couldn't find a way to boost their survivability if we really tried to make it the priority of the character build, while also simultaneously giving them a soft taunt that we talk about so often with the tank builds that we do, which that first Bear Totem Barbarian did not have. And today is finally the day that I'm going to do that. And there are actually a lot of really great and unique things we can do to make them fun and interesting and more durable in a fight than I originally gave them credit for. Not only that, but thanks to the way that we are going to pair them with another class this time, I think they'll probably have a better taunt than the vast majority of the tanks that I've ever built. Meaning that regardless of whether or not they might be the best for survivability when compared on the spreadsheet to other tank builds I've done to date, they might be the best, or at least one of the best, at actually protecting their allies. And at the end of the day, that is the true measure of how effective a tank really is, right? But here's the actual big problem with not only the Bear Totem Barbarian, but barbarians in general in D&D 5e. While they get super amazing features very early on in their careers, barbarians are sort of notorious for just scaling really, really poorly. I'd probably argue that they might be the best, or at least among the best, early level characters in all of 5e, but who probably scale worse than any other character class in game. Beyond level 5, maybe 6, depending on your subclass, it's almost never a great idea, mechanically speaking, in my personal opinion, to take more levels in Barbarian for just about any character, even though I myself have done it on a number of occasions. And so, since I tend to build these characters to be both fun and powerful, I'm not actually going to make this character one who is primarily a barbarian. The Bear Totem aspect of the character will absolutely be core to who they are and what they do, but this character, anyway, will take advantage of those great Bear Totem features, but not hang around in order to pick up some pretty lackluster things later on, like brutal critical, etc. And so, let's talk about episode 118, the Bardificer Tank, the Tinkering Bear, the Armored Bear, the Barbarian Tinker. We'll just go the Bear Totem Guardian. I know, it's a little boring, but I have to think about the algorithm and the click-through rate. Big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for this fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week for every character concept I send him, and I love every one of them. He's a fantastic artist, as many of you well know. If you want to follow him on social media to check out what other things he's done, or maybe even potentially reach out to him to try and commission him to create some art for your character or your party, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. Thanks, Randall. I also wanted to spend a couple of minutes here quickly and talk about the video sponsor this week, which is, again, Established Titles. These guys sponsored a video for me a few weeks ago, and I guess it did so well that they wanted to do a couple more, which I'm thrilled about. So thanks to those of you who supported them, and for everybody else, listen up, this is a really cool company. Established Titles is a really fun and unique way to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland and also help global reforestation efforts, but being able to establish yourself as a lord or lady, or laird, my preference, of Scotland. Here's how it works. According to a historic Scottish custom, landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies. Now, while being a Scottish landowner does not grant you the right to rule or make you a member of the royal family, you can technically refer to yourself as a lord or lady. You can even, officially put it on your credit card, plane tickets, heck, even your dating profile. That might get you some interesting queries. Established Titles offers a variety of title packs where you can purchase anywhere from 1 to 10 square feet of land, so not a huge lot, nothing that you're going to be building on. These plots are located in a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. When you make a purchase, they will send you an official certificate with a crest, like they did for me a few weeks ago. Check that out. You better believe I'm hanging that up in my office. Now, the best part about what they do at Established Titles is that they will actually plant a tree in your name with every purchase that you make. They work with the global charities One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation efforts all over the world. And not only that, but by purchasing this small plot of land, you're helping to keep the woodlands of Scotland from being developed. And that's great for the environment as well. Anyway, it's all for fun and for a good cause. I personally think it would make a fantastic last-minute gift, especially with Christmas coming, right? Only a month to go. Oh, and don't forget, the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link right here, and I'll put that in the video description as well, will essentially be very close to my plot, within a short walking distance. And we could totally set up like a little D4 kingdom, which would be awesome. Established Titles is running an early Black Friday sale, so go check it out, save some money for your purchase, and actually, if you use the code D4 at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off on top of what you're already saving. Go check them out, buy your friend or family a fantastic Christmas gift, or yourself, because you deserve it. Big thanks to Established Titles, and let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, for our starting class, we are actually going to start off this character as an artificer. I have many good reasons for wanting to take artificer levels on this character, though It may seem a little counterintuitive at first to be pairing a spellcaster with a barbarian. I think it will make sense eventually if it doesn't already. And yes, I do think it's important to start Artificer here for at least one big reason that I'm sure many of you can guess. So yeah, when we first meet our champion, they are something of a tinkerer or a crafter, I think. But for me, I would probably make my backstory go something like this. My character hails from a barbarian tribe, but they're a bit of a misfit among their fellow clansmen and women. They're strong enough, they're pretty beefy, sure, they like to rage too, but their true passion lies in working with their hands and their mind to create things. Little clockwork contraptions, perhaps, or small tinkered creations of artifice. But here's the reality. They're not very good at it. I think this would actually be like a flaw or a shtick that I'd want to work into this character and kind of let it run throughout their career. They're this artificer who wants to be amazing at artifice, but actually they're just kind of okay. And that fact really has a tendency to piss them off sometimes, as they get incredibly frustrated by their own occasional ineptitude. That said, there is one particular area where this artificer excels, and that is creating and enhancing weapons and armor. It is their knack that always seems to work flawlessly when their other creations end up looking like something that might belong on the island of misfit toys from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. As for our race, here's the thing. I've already said that I'm planning on going Bear Totem Barbarian eventually, and famously, Bear Totem Barbarians get resistance to all damage except psychic. But, of course, there are no fewer than 4 races currently in 5e that offer resistance to psychic damage. And sure, we could go another route for our race here. Resistance to psychic damage isn't actually going to even show up on my spreadsheets at all. But come on. We have to take one of those races, right? We have to. I don't think I could sleep at night if resistance to all damage was just hanging there and I didn't take it. Now, as for the options available to us to get psychic resistance, we have the Gem Dragonborn, the Kalishtar, the Githyanki, and the Githzerai. I think of all of them, my favorite is the Gem Dragonborn, followed closely by the Kalishtar. I think any of them could work great. I love the Kalishtar primarily because in addition to psychic resistance, they get advantage on all wisdom saving throws, and that's kind of awesome. That said, our wisdom score is not going to be very high on this character, and we're not going to have wisdom saving throw proficiency unless we perhaps take the resilient wisdom feat at some point in our career, which would not be a bad idea. But without that feat, advantage on wisdom saves might not actually result in turning a lot of wisdom save failures into wisdom save successes. So if you plan on getting resilient wisdom early on in your career, I'd probably go Kalishtar, unless you can't play with the races from the Eberron book. But otherwise, yeah, I love me some Dragonborn. The Gem Dragonborn subclass was introduced to us with Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and they're super fun and flavorful, I think. As with all Dragonborn, you choose a Draconic, or in our case, Gem ancestry, and yes, we would want to make sure that we took the Emerald ancestry, as that is the one that gives us resistance to psychic damage. The other great features about Gem Dragonborn are their Psionic Mind feature that lets you communicate telepathically, always handy. Their breath weapon attack, which might be a nice way to throw out some area of effect damage in a pinch, and then yes, flight. Gem Flight gives you a flying speed with hover even that you can use once per day for a whole minute. No spells, no concentration, really potent set of features here. And as a great lover of dragons, I'm always looking for an excuse to play a Dragonborn. As for our starting abilities, I'm assuming, as always, that we're using the point buy method here and would recommend taking a 15 in our Constitution with a +1 there from our racial, a 15 Strength with a +1 there, a 12 Intelligence with a +1 there, and then a 13 Dexterity. An Artificer Barbarian who values survivability over everything else is, gonna be pretty dang mad. Not raging, though that too, but multiple ability score dependent. I really wish we could have gotten our dexterity to at least a 14, but alas, we just didn't have the points for it since we need strength, as we'll talk about in a second. Constitution's our most important stat if we're really emphasizing survivability, and we had to have a 13 intelligence to be able to multi-class out of Artificer later. Maybe you'll roll for stats and get lucky, but for us, this is where we're at. As for starting equipment, I would say go with the goal buy method as I usually do, and let's pick up some scale mail, a shield, and like a mace or whatever other favorite one-handed D6 weapon available to you. We only have simple weapon proficiencies at the moment. And then be sure to grab some artisan tools that you'll need to cast spells. And then as an Artificer 1, we get Magical Tinkering. This is a nice little utility feature that Artificers get, allowing us to turn a non-magical tiny object into something that emits a sound or a visual effect or light or even a recorded message. And then of course we get spells. Now, since we are a spellcaster with a pretty lousy spellcasting ability score, any spells we should take should probably be ones that just tend to work without needing a high spellcasting stat to make them work well. This usually is going to mean utility and support options like Guidance, Cure Wounds, Featherfall, Identify, but I think we should also be sure to grab Booming Blade here. Booming Blade can be a nice way to discourage our enemy from leaving our side and going to attack a squishier, weaker ally, since if they move away from us after we've hit them with Booming Blade, right, and we make a weapon attack as part of casting the spell, they will both risk taking an opportunity attack from us, but then also take extra thunder damage when they move. Since we don't have extra attack or anything at the moment, that's definitely what I would be doing with my action on most turns. At level 2, as an Artificer, we get Infuse Item. Probably, as I like to say, my favorite Artificer feature. It lets you take some non-magical items and infuse them to make them magical. And there are a ton of really fun and cool ones that we get to choose from. Right now, we can learn 4 infusions, but only have 2 active at any one time. We can't repeat any infusion on multiple items, and we can't infuse the same item with multiple infusions. On this character, I would plan on using Enhanced Defense, which we can put on our shield to give it a +1 to AC, and then Enhanced Weapon to give our mace a +1 to hit and to damage. As for the other options that you pick, I'd say go ahead and PYF, pick your favorites. At level 3, we get the right tool for the job, which lets us magically create a set of artisan's tools. Hopefully that comes in handy for you at some point in the game. And then we get our Artificer subclass, or Artificer Specialist. And yes, we are going with Armorer, as we do quite often on tank builds. Armorers get a lot of fantastic features and are easily my favorite subclass for Artificers, and we're going to make a lot of great use of things we get here. So yeah, it turns out that your knack for creating and enhancing weapons and armor has led you to create your first masterpiece, your pièce de résistance. A magical suit of arcane armor. This is such a fantastic feature. Your newly minted arcane armor can function as an arcane focus for your armorer spells. Very nice. In addition, we can doff or don it as an action, and it cannot be removed from us against our will. But then we get to choose between 2 models for our arcane armor, the Infiltrator model and the Guardian model. I do love the Infiltrator model, and have done a couple of builds for them in the past, like the Infiltrator. But of course, for this character, I'm going to assume that we're hanging out in the Guardian model pretty much all of the time, though you can switch it up with a short or a long rest if you ever need to do some infiltrating, and that is really nice. But the Guardian model gets 2 amazing features for tanks. First and foremost is the Thunder Gauntlets feature, which tells us that so long as we're not holding anything in them, each of the armor's gauntlets count as a simple melee weapon that we are proficient with. They do 1d8 damage on a hit, and most importantly, any enemy you hit with them has disadvantage on attacks they make against anyone other than you until your next turn, and thus we have what we like to call our soft taunt feature, our method of reliably and consistently encouraging our enemies to attack us instead of our allies, as every good tank should be doing. I know I say this in pretty much all of my tank builds, but at the risk of beating a dead horse, without a feature like this, you're just not really a tank. You're just hard to kill. Not the same thing. It was, to me, perhaps the biggest flaw of my original Bear Totem Barbarian tank. They weren't really a tank in that they weren't really doing much to draw enemy fire and or discourage enemies from attacking their more vulnerable allies, other than perhaps attacking recklessly, I suppose, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, one feature that I've usually really loved taking advantage of with armorers is that your Thunder Gauntlet attacks can be made with your intelligence modifier to hit and damage instead of strength. But thankfully here, can doesn't mean must, and for this character we definitely would prefer just sticking with old reliable strength for our attacks. Thank you very much. We do also get the defensive field feature here, which tells us that proficiency bonus times per day, we can, as a bonus action, give ourselves temporary hit points equal to our Artificer level, so that's 3 for now. Not a ton, but it will scale, and for Barbarians especially, hit points are paramount to survivability. And speaking of Barbarians, at level 4, now that we've gotten our very important Guardian Armorer features, I think that it's time to let our inner rage out. Yes, it's time to embrace our barbarian heritage. I don't know that I would necessarily feel like I needed to come up with like a great in-game excuse or reason for multiclassing here. So long as you build it into your backstory, talk it over with your DM. For me, as someone who grew up in a barbarian tribe, I've simply at this point decided to follow in my tribe's footsteps now and take up the mantle of Raging Rampager. Though in our case, we just happen to bring a little of our own homebrewed enchantments to the battlefield when we seek to sate our bloodlust. We are the thinking person's barbarian. And so, yes, we would be a barbarian 1 here. That means we get unarmored defense. For us, pretty much unusable. It allows our AC to be equal to our dexterity modifier plus our constitution modifier if we're not wearing any armor. And not only would that be worse for us than just wearing the best medium armor we can get at this point, but it also kind of ruins the whole point of going armorer, right? All of our best armorer features are coming from our arcane armor. Sorry, barbarian, no naked for you. But then, yes, of course, we get Rage. Rage is a really powerful feature, and I really love it on this character. I think, for me, the first time that I used it would probably be as a result of, like, one of my little Artificer creations not working properly or breaking down or something. I want to be this amazing Artificer so bad. When something doesn't work, it just makes me so angry. Anyway, twice per long rest, for now, as a bonus action, we can Rage, which tells us that our strength-based attacks do an extra 2 damage per hit. This is one of the reasons why we didn't want to build an intelligence-based barbarian artificer, right? As fun as that would have been, no doubt, sort of like Smart Hulk or something. But yeah, we wouldn't get that bonus damage if we were using intelligence for our attacks, even though we could, since Rage specifically says when you make a melee weapon attack using strength, you get the bonus damage. Also, with Rage, you have advantage on strength checks and saves, which is really nice if we want to be grappling a target, for example. And I think doing so would definitely be worth considering on many occasions. But then, most importantly for us, we have resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is fantastic for our survivability, of course. Now, keep in mind that you lose your rage after 1 minute or if you go for an entire round without attacking or taking damage. So make sure to grab a good thrown weapon in case you can't get in range of an enemy while raging. And then, yes, the thing that's probably had some of you scratching your head for a little while now, while raging, we can't concentrate on or cast spells. So yeah, no more Booming Blade, among other things. So why did we go Artificer for our taunt instead of, say, like Cavalier Fighter? First of all, because it's totally awesome and weird. But there are some really great mechanical benefits too, some of which we'll get into later, but yeah, the Thunder Gauntlet taunt is really strong. The ability to cast nice utility and support spells outside of combat, those infusions are really great for survivability and for giving us a plus to hit and damage and thereby land our taunt more reliably. And there are some spells that we will be using later on to bolster our survivability that don't require our concentration, so just hold your horses. At level 5, we would be a Barbarian too. And that means we get Danger Sense. That gives us advantage on dexterity saving throws against things we can see, like spells and traps. That'll be really nice for those pesky fireballs later. And then, yes, Reckless Attack. This is one of the most powerful and important features for any barbarian, but maybe for us especially. With Reckless Attack, when you make your first attack on your turn, you can decide to attack recklessly, which gives you advantage on your attacks this turn and your enemies advantage on their attacks to hit you until your next turn, and we actually love both of these things. First of all, advantage on our attacks, of course, because if we're not hitting our enemy, then we're not landing our soft taunt and giving disadvantage for that enemy to attack anyone but us, and thus help protect our allies. Having advantage obviously greatly improves our chances of doing that all-important thing. But now, giving our enemies disadvantage to attack anyone other than us and advantage if they attack us is like the equivalent of the D&D 5e super taunt. Part of the problem that I probably don't talk about enough in my other tank builds is the fact that depending on how smart your enemies are, or on how much your dungeon master might be metagaming you, sometimes making yourself really hard to hit and kill, especially via a ridiculously high armor class, might not work out to our advantage as much as we would like, right? Since even if we're imposing disadvantage on our enemies for attacking anyone other than us, if we've got an AC of 1.21 gigawatts, 1.21 gigawatts! Mathematically speaking, the enemy is still probably more likely to hit our ally with their medium to crappy armor class, even if they have disadvantage for attempting to do so, than they would be to hit us. Not that imposing disadvantage isn't helpful for your allies regardless, but still. I mean, if you're giving the enemy disadvantage when they attack anyone other than you, and advantage if they attack you, I defy any DM out there to not just keep swinging away, even if you have resistance to damage. I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, those enemies are just going to keep doing everything in their power to bring you down. You're so tantalizing. And as the party's tank, of course, that is exactly what we want. It might not do great things for our survivability per se, but it does amazing things for helping us to actually be a potent and powerful tank and protector. And that's the whole point of building and playing this character, right? Don't forget also, at character level 5 here, we get our Gem Dragon Flight, and that will be awesome. But at level 6, we would be a Barbarian 3. That means first up we get 3 rages per day, not just 2. That's very important, since most of us seem to only have 2 or 3 combat encounters per long rest on most days, and this makes me a lot more comfortable assuming that we'll have rage available for most, if not all of our fights most of the time. But then yes, we get our primal path here, our barbarian subclass. And as I've said, we're going path of the totem warrior. So since I haven't done a totem barbarian in ages, let's read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about them. The path of the totem warrior is a spiritual journey, as the barbarian accepts a spirit animal as guide, protector, and inspiration. In battle, your totem spirit fills you with supernatural might, adding magical fuel to your barbarian rage. Most barbarian tribes consider a totem animal to be kin to a particular clan. In such cases, it is unusual for an individual to have more than one totem animal spirit, though exceptions exist. Now, while I do think this should be kind of a momentous event in your character's journey, I don't know that I would necessarily feel like it would have to be anything particularly out of the ordinary for members of your tribe. They are shamanistic in nature, and this spiritual journey where you find like your spirit animal might simply be a regular part of like a coming of age ritual that every member of your tribe goes through when they accomplish a certain task or reach a particular milestone in their life's journey. I would for sure work it out with my DM beforehand to make this moment in game stand out and be momentous and cool though. But then as a totem warrior, we get Spirit Seeker, which lets us cast the Beast Sense and Speak with Animal spells, but only as rituals, and that's really quite a nice bit of utility. And then most importantly, we get the Totem Spirit feature, which tells us that we get to choose a totem spirit from a short list and gain its features. And yes, we're going with Bear, of course. Now, let me say this. I know a lot of people claim that Bear is kind of like the only real choice here, but I feel like I need to point out that I've used Wolf to, I think, create effect on at least one build in the past, the Wolf and Coyote, which was actually a 2-character like team-up build. So don't discount the other totems here. But yes, if you're wanting to be as survivable as possible, it's hard to beat good old Bear Totem. Because with this spirit, when we're raging, we have resistance to not just bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, but all damage except psychic, as we've mentioned. And since we're an Emerald Gem Dragonborn, get out of here with all of your homebrew monsters that just happen to do psychic damage, DM. Suck it. All right. At level 6, it is time for our first damage report, and for those who are new to the channel, let me explain how we calculate damage numbers very quickly against our tank builds. For everyone else, feel free to skip ahead 60, 90 seconds or so. So we pit our characters against 3 hypothetical combat encounters of medium difficulty for a party of 4 at this level. One is a boss fight against a dragon, one's a typical fight against 4 or 5 normal-ish enemies that you might be fighting at this level, and the third is just a level-appropriate fireball. We figure out how much damage our tank would take if they had access to all of their resources, a use of rage in our case, or the temporary hit points we get from defensive field. That number is our DTPR, damage taken per round. We then determine how long our tank would survive if they took that exact amount of damage every single round, which gives us our rounds to die, or RTD. It's flawed. You might not have any more uses of defensive field or rage when you're in a fight, but as I do with all of my builds, I like to calculate numbers based on best case scenario in the interest of exploring what's possible, mechanically speaking, for each character. Also, every enemy on the battlefield is very unlikely to spend their entire turn attacking you and only you round after round after round, right? That'd be awesome if they did, but it's pretty unlikely. So we're not necessarily trying to perfectly recreate a combat encounter here. The model's imperfect but serviceable so long as we apply it to every single tank character that we do, and I have. Unless the enemy has studied his Agrippa, which I have. Right now, with a shield and a +1 to AC on that shield from enhanced defense and a 13 dexterity. Assuming we've managed to get half-plate armor, our armor class is good if not great compared to other tanks anyway, at 19. With a 16 constitution, we'd be sitting at 57 hit points, but we do get 3 temporary hit points from our defensive field, and I'll go ahead and assume that we are getting to use that all 3 times available to us, for a grand total of 66 hit points. And keep in mind, of course, that we have resistance to all damage. So that's kind of like 132 hit points compared to other characters, and that's pretty dang nice. And so, for our boss fight here at level 6, we're going up against a young white dragon, and if they did nothing but attack us with just their bite and claw attacks every single round, they would on average do 16 damage to us, and at that rate, we would survive for 5 rounds. Our typical fight here was against 4 berserkers, and our DTPR against them was 12, and at that rate we would survive for 6 rounds. And then against a level 3 DC 14 fireball, we would take 9 damage per round on average, and at that rate we would survive for 7 rounds. And sure, not super surprisingly, when you compare this build to other tank builds that I've done to date at this level, that puts them kind of in the bottom half of tier 2 for attacks against their AC, but at the very top of tier 2 for that fireball. And the reality is this: due to how few resources we're expending for our survivability, and the fact that we have resistance to all damage, when you get this character outside of the lab and the spreadsheets and into an actual combat encounter, they're very likely going to perform a lot stronger by comparison. What's more, they have probably the best taunt you can get outside of like the Mountain Blade team up tank build that I did, right? Where the rider tank was literally just forcing any attack made against their centaur friend mount to be directed at them, the tank, instead. So again, while giving our enemies advantage to hit us doesn't do great things for our survivability, it does amazing things for our ability to keep our allies safe. So make no mistake, we are a very effective protector and tank, and incredibly hard to kill. And it's only going to get better. Because at level 7, guess what? We're going back to Artificer. That's right. Like I said at the beginning, there's just not a lot for barbarians that's super desirable after those early levels. While on the other hand, there is a ton of stuff that I want out of Artificer that's going to make us more survivable. Not to mention increase our utility and support functionality to boot, which is always welcome. So, we would be an Artificer 4 here, and that means we get an ability score increase or feat. And as much as I'd love to bump my Constitution or Dexterity, or honestly my Strength might be most important of all to help ensure that I land that Thunder Gauntlet attack, but we do have advantage reliably and a +1 thanks to our infusion. So anyway, the best thing we can do for our survivability at this point in our career is to take the tough feat, since it gives us 2 hit points per level, and for those of us who have resistance to all damage while raging, per level, and I cannot say no to that. At level 8, we would be an Artificer 5, and as an Armorer, we get extra attack, and that's one of the main reasons why I don't feel really bad about not taking more levels in Barbarian. This is going to mean more chances to put our soft taunt on our enemy, do a little more damage, or better yet, apply it to 2 enemies potentially for even better ally protection. We also get 2nd level Artificer spells here, and there are some good support spells at this level, especially that we could make great use of to help both our party and ourselves. Lesser Restoration is a nice way to cure a bunch of unsavory conditions, and Aid will raise the maximum hit point for us and 2 of our allies by 5, increasing by 5 more for each level we upcast it. Again, with hit points being so valuable for us especially, I'm going to assume that going forward we've upcast Aid on ourselves to the highest level possible whenever I crunch numbers. But there's another spell that I'm kind of excited about here. See, Armorers get a number of free spells that are always prepared. I didn't talk about the ones we got at Artificer level 3, Magic Missile and Thunderwave, because I'm not really planning on using them in combat. But at Artificer 5, we get Shatter, which is an AoE spell that I don't think we'll use much either, and then Mirror Image, which is unique among Artificers. Mirror Image. I really love this spell. It creates 3 illusory duplicates of yourself that last for a minute and that move with and mimic you. When an enemy targets you with an attack, you roll a d20, and depending on what you roll, the enemy might target your image instead of you. Now, I've actually been trying to come up with a way to work this spell into a tank build for quite some time now, and I think our Barbarian Guardian might just be the perfect opportunity to do so for a few reasons. See, Mirror Image does not require concentration, like Aid, so you could cast it at the beginning of a combat encounter, or better yet, right before combat broke out if you knew it was coming, and could then rage in a subsequent round and not worry about losing the spell's effects. Now, one big downside to this spell is that the illusory images only have an armor class of 10 plus your dexterity modifier. So if you're a character who has a really high armor class, a lot of the time an enemy will hit one of your duplicates with an attack roll that would not have hit you anyway. So using Mirror Image is a little bit of a waste. But if you're a Barbarian attacking recklessly, you're fairly easy to hit. So it seems like the perfect time to try and incorporate Mirror Image to me. It can be a little challenging to use, admittedly, since it costs an action to cast the spell. You wouldn't want to cast it on round 1 and then rage, since you need to either make an attack or take damage in order for rage to last until the next round, right? And we used our action to cast a spell. So yes, if I'm going to apply this spell to our numbers when I crunch them, I'm doing so under the assumption that you got it going right before combat started, or perhaps on round 1, which would add a round of setup for us. That's not always ideal. But in the interest of exploring best case scenario numbers, let's throw it in there for fun and see how much it helps. At level 9, we'd be a Barbarian 4. Did I say we're not taking any more Barbarian levels? I meant with the exception of the ability score increase or feat that's just waiting for us there at Barbarian 4. So yeah, I wanted to push to extra attack, Mirror Image, Aid. Now that we've got those things, I think I'd dip back into Barbarian just for one more level here, grab that ability score increase or feat because we want every one of those that we can get. And for us, yeah, I think that means bumping Constitution. I'd really love to increase my dexterity, both for my armor class and for my saving throw purposes, not to mention initiative rolls. But since we're attacking recklessly and have resistance to all damage, we get more mileage out of hit points than we do a higher armor class. So in the name of maximum survivability, I'm going to bump our Constitution here, taking it to an 18. You might want to go with a dexterity half feat, or even bump your strength or something else, to which I'd say go for it. But at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. And since last check, we've increased our temporary hit points from defensive field a little bit. We've added the tough feat. We've raised our constitution, added the aid spell, and even a fun little toy that will help our survivability a little bit with mirror image. Extra attack is a welcome addition as well to help us taunt more, do a little more damage, and we've even added a little more support functionality. Our armor class hasn't increased since our last check, but our hit points, if you include our temporary and increased maximum hit points, have gone up to a whopping 133, basically double. And so, against our boss fight here, which was a young blue dragon, our damage taken per round would be 20, and at that rate we would survive for 9 rounds. The typical fight was against 4 hobgoblin captains, and the DTPR was 21 with an RTD of 7, and against a level 5 DC 15 fireball, we were taking 12 damage per round on average, and at that rate we would survive for 11 rounds. So mirror image isn't doing a ton for us there. It basically is adding a round or 2 of survivability for attacks made against our armor class. Doesn't help us at all with the fireball, right? And that's based on some overly simplistic math that I used. But you know what? A round or 2 of survivability, I'll take it. And compared to other tank builds at this level, we're not doing too bad. About the middle of tier 2 for attacks against our armor class, and still near the top of tier 2 for that fireball. We taunt like a champ, bring a little support to the game, some utility as well, and we are as tough as nails. I love it. At level 10, we're going back to Artificer here. We'd be an Artificer 6, and we get Tool Expertise. This doubles our proficiency bonus for any ability check that we make with a tool that uses our proficiency bonus. So it's kind of like expertise for tools. Would probably be most useful if we had Thieves' Tools proficiency, but maybe your DM really likes to call for Smith's Tools checks or something. I don't know. We do also, though, importantly, get to use a 3rd infusion now at Artificer 6. And that's nice, as it's just in time for us to get access to some more powerful infusions as well. At this point, I would be swapping out enhanced defense on my shield for the repulsion shield infusion. This not only similarly gives us a +1 to the AC of our shield, but then lets us use our reaction when we're hit by a melee attack to push the attacker 15 feet away from us. Granted, we're often going to want to keep the enemy close to us, but once in a while you might be in a place where you could push them into a nasty spell effect or off a cliff or something, so it'll be a cool and fun tool to have when you need it. I'd also swap out Enhanced Weapon for Radiant Weapon, which similarly adds a +1 to your Thunder Gauntlet, but then lets you use a bonus action to cause it to shed bright light for 30 feet and dim light for 30 more, but then also lets you use your reaction when you're hit by any attack, not just melee, to try and blind your attacker. They make a con save, boo, against your pretty weak spell save DC, boo ×2. This one might be even a little less useful than the repulsion shield, frankly, but hey, it does a little more for us at this level than the plain old enhanced weapon would, so might as well, right? At level 11, we would be an Artificer 7, and we get Flash of Genius. This tells us that intelligence modifier per day, so once, boo, when you or another creature within 30 feet makes an ability check or saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. So +1, boo ×2. Yeah, this makes me pretty sad that we didn't get our intelligence score higher, but them's the breaks for this build. It'll still be nice once in a great while, but hey, chin up. We also got another 2nd level spell slot. At level 12, we would be an Artificer 8, and we get another ability score increase for feat. Same arguments as before. Feel free to bump strength or dexterity or heck, even intelligence now. In fact, just going a +1 dex and +1 intelligence wouldn't be the worst, so we could have a 14 in each. But yeah, I'm going to bump constitution here so I can cap it at 20 for the sake of the spreadsheet. At level 13, we would be an Artificer 9. And this is a really nice level for us because as an armorer, we get the super fantastic armor modifications ability. This tells us that, as opposed to previously, our armor now counts as a bunch of separate items for the purpose of infusing them. Before this level, we could really only use 1 infusion for our entire set of armor, which we were using for our Thunder Gauntlets, right? As that's part of our armor. But now our chest piece counts as separate from our special weapon, our helm, and our boots. So we can put lots of different infusions on the different pieces of our armor. Better yet, we get to infuse 2 more items now for a total of 5, so long as at least 2 of those infusions are on our armor. No problem. So now we're going to want to put enhanced defense on our chest piece and leave radiant weapon on our gauntlet. Keep repulsion shield on our shield. And for the other 2 infusions, I'm going to say pick your favorites, but if it were me, I think I would go with Homunculus Servant for a little scouting utility and also to be able to make an attack or take the help action on our turn to help one of our allies maybe. You'd use your bonus action in order to do that, but we should have that available semi-frequently. So it'll be nice to have a good use of our bonus action when we're not raging or using our defensive field, etc. I think I'd probably also go with the spell refueling ring for my last infusion, which lets us recover a spell slot of 3rd level or lower once per day. And that's pretty dang nice, especially since at this level we get 3rd level spells. Armorers get Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt for free, and that would be awesome if we were planning on using spells in combat regularly and had a good intelligence score. As is, I would continue to focus on those really nice support and utility spells, so things like Catnap for a 10-minute short rest, Dispel Magic is often useful, the power of Fly can rarely be overestimated to get your party to those hard-to-reach places and enemies, Revivify, of course, for resurrection in a pinch, and maybe most importantly for this build, the haste spell. It's not, unfortunately, something that I'll plan on using in combat, since it requires concentration, but especially if you're playing at a table where 4 or more combats per long rest happens semi-frequently, it'll be a good go-to concentration spell for when you don't have any uses of rage left, since haste increases our armor class by 2, doubles our move speed, and lets us take an extra attack once per turn, among other things. At level 13, it is time for our next damage report. We've seen some decent gains since last check. Our AC has gone up by 1 thanks to our ability to use both the enhanced defense and repulsion shield infusions. We've capped our constitution score and picked up some nice additional utility and support features to boot. Our armor class is now sitting at a 20, which feels way better than a 19 for some reason, and if you include aid, upcast at the 3rd level, and our defensive field temporary hit points, we've got a potential cap of 209 hit points, and that is beefy. And so, against our boss fight here, which was an adult white dragon, if they did nothing but attack us for their turn, we would on average take 21 damage per round, and at that rate we would survive for 12 rounds. The typical fight was against 5 helmed horrors, and our DTPR there was 30. We don't do quite as well against lots of little attacks, especially because mirror image becomes less useful. But at that rate, our RTD was 8, and against a level 7 fireball, DC of 16, we would take 16 damage per round on average, and at that rate we'd survive for 14 rounds. And compared to other tank builds that I've done at this level, that's still kind of just happily in the middle of tier 2 for survivability across the board. Not a bad place to be at all. Level 14 means Artificer 10, and this is another pretty nice level for us, because at Artificer 10 we get to infuse another item for a total of 6 now for us, and one of those can be a Cloak of Protection, using the Replicate Magic Item infusion. This is actually one of my favorite magic items in-game, and I feel like I take it on pretty much every character whenever I can get it. It's really boring. It just gives you a +1 to your armor class and to all of your saving throws. I mean, I don't know, what can I say? I like big numbers, and I cannot lie. Oh, that was so bad. I need to put myself in timeout for that one. So yeah, Cloak of Protection, awesome for our tankiness. Not only that, but Enhanced Defense Infusion goes up to a +2 armor class now, and the Enhanced Weapon Infusion would similarly give us a +2 to hit and damage, unlike Radiant Weapon, which doesn't scale. So I would swap back to Enhanced Weapon from Radiant Weapon on our gauntlet at this point. We also, happily, at this level get Magic Item Adept, which lets us craft magic items more quickly and cheaply if that's a thing at your table, but also lets us attune to 4 magic items now instead of the usual 3. And you know what? Honestly, this might be one of the most powerful and underrated Artificer abilities. The more time I spend playing 5e, the more frustrated I become with the 3 attunement slot cap. Magic items are such a huge part of a character's power level in 5e, at most tables anyway, who aren't playing like in a low magic world, right? And almost all of the best magic items require attunement. Being able to attune a 4th can really be a huge power boost for most players at most tables. Unfortunately, it's not really possible for me to account for that in the numbers, because I have no idea what magic items you may or may not have access to in your campaign. But enjoy that power boost regardless. At level 15, we would be an Artificer 11, and Speaking of really powerful Artificer abilities, here we get another one of the most powerful Artificer abilities, if not the most powerful Artificer ability, the spell storing item. This lets us store an Artificer spell of 1st or 2nd level in any martial weapon or spell focus. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action, and we get to store double our intelligence modifier number of spells there, so 2 for us. Boo. The thing that makes this so potent, of course, is that we can give this item to another creature and then they can use their action to cast the spell from it. And it can even be a concentration spell. It just means that they will have to concentrate on it. There's no reason why, rules as written, you couldn't give this item to your homunculus servant and have them concentrate on a spell for you, letting you essentially use a concentration spell while being a raging barbarian. And that is so freaking awesome. But there's one little downside though. Most of the best 1st and 2nd level Artificer spells that require concentration are things that would allow for an enemy saving throw. Things like Web or Fairy Fire. And we have a very crappy intelligence score. So if it were me, I think I would probably use the Enlarge Reduce spell here and just have your homunculus make us big. When we are enlarged, we grow to large size, and honestly, as a tank, that's pretty great. It's not really going to show up on the spreadsheet for survivability, but it will let us potentially reach more enemies, grapple bigger enemies, and just take up more real estate on the map, right? Potentially blocking off choke points to help keep our allies safe, or just making ourselves a bigger, more obvious target for our enemies. We also get to do an additional d4 of damage on our weapon attacks with Enlarge, so that's nice. At level 16, we would be an Artificer 12, and we get another ability score increase or feat. And yeah, you know, if it were me actually playing this character in game, I think I probably would go like +1 to Dex, +1 to Int here. Bumps our AC, gives us a better initiative score, better dexterity saving throws, and then lets our intelligence modifier be a +2 as well for things like our spell storing ring, our flash of genius, etc. But since I'm building for survivability, and I'm a slave to the spreadsheet, exploring the limits of what's possible, I'm going to go ahead and take Resilient Dexterity here to give us a +1 to our dex, bumping it to 14, and giving us proficiency in our dexterity saving throws. You might be better off with Resilient Wisdom or any other number of options, but this is going to do the most for our numbers, especially since we're about to face a meteor swarm here in just a second. At level 17, finally, for us, we would be an Artificer 13, and we get 4th level spells. Armorers get Fire Shield and Greater Invisibility for free. Fire Shield could especially be nice, I think, on a character who's trying to get hit a lot, because then it will return damage to the attacker. And yeah, for the other ones, I'm just going to say pick your favorites. There's nothing here that I'd really plan on using during combat, but lots of great options for utility and support. As always, Arcane Eye is even better than your homunculus. For scouting ahead or behind, they can go unseen, and you can see through that eye. Freedom of movement doesn't require concentration and can keep you or an ally from getting bogged down or grappled. Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum is my favorite place to take a long rest this side of Tiny Hut. But yeah, PYF, we of course are going to use that 4th level spell slot to upcast Aid. And speaking of which, yes, it's time for our final damage report at level 17 here. Since last check, we've gained 3 to our armor class thanks to Cloak of Protection, the bump to enhanced defense, and our bump to dexterity. Plus, we have much stronger dexterity saving throws, a bunch more hit points thanks to 4th level spell slots, more Artificer levels, and just more character levels in general, and some nice utility, damage, and wildcard power thanks to being able to attune to another magic item. At this level, we are sitting at a 23 armor class and a total maximum potential hit points pool of 269. And so against our boss fight here, which was an adult red dragon, on average, we would take 25 damage per round if they just sat there attacking us on their turn, and at that rate we would survive for 13 rounds. The typical fight here was against 5 earth elementals, and our DTPR against them was 40, and the RTD then was 8, and against, yes, not a fireball, but a meteor swarm spell. We're level 17 after all. We would on average take 39 damage per round, and at that rate we would survive for 7 rounds. And if you're wondering why the RTD is lower on meteor swarm than against the earth elementals, even though our DTPR was lower on the meteor swarm, it's because we're not benefiting at all from mirror image with meteor swarm, right? Anyway, these numbers keep us sort of still kind of comfortably in the middle of tier 2 compared to other tank builds that I've done to date at this level. And honestly, I'm feeling really great about that. So let's get into final thoughts. The tier score for this character, if you take their rounds to die against every single one of the fights that we did at all the damage reports and just averaged it into one number, was a 9. So yes, that puts us near the bottom of tier 2 overall for tank builds. And in fact, the only character who performs worse is the other Bear Totem Barbarian build that I did. So what does that mean? Does it mean that Bear Totem Barbarians really aren't as durable as everybody thinks? I guess I would say yes and no. On the one hand, sure. If you're attacking recklessly, not wearing heavy armor, and not concentrating on or casting spells during combat, plus giving advantage to your enemies when they're trying to hit you, like I've said, you're gonna have a tough time getting into those super high armor classes that some characters can potentially get up to. And since the vast majority of damage we take as players in D&D 5e comes in the form of attacks against our armor class, then yes, even with resistance to all damage, we might not be quite as durable as some other character builds. But on the other hand, no, they are incredibly durable, just as durable as everybody thinks. The truth is, like I've said, these character builds and damage reports are all done in a lab of hypotheticals and not on the battlefield. Sometimes you will be going up against enemies that are doing force damage or psychic damage, etc. And very few builds that I've done to date get resistance to all of these things. What's more, like I've said, it's pretty much never going to happen that every enemy on the battlefield just spends their entire turn every round just attacking you over and over again. Of course, if they did, that would be a huge win for the entire team. But assuming they don't, this character is kind of just never going to die unless everybody else goes down first. What's more, a lot of DMs, when they end up playing against a character who has an insanely crazy high armor class, will often end up bringing more and more enemies to the fight that are requiring players to make saving throws or take damage. Just like Monty did against Kelly in that one-shot that we did many months ago. And for those kinds of enemies, having resistance to anything they throw your way is going to make us really outshine most other characters who are built for survivability. But in the end, the real question that we should be trying to answer here is not so much how long would this character stand up against a continual onslaught of enemies that are trying to attack them, but how good a job would this character do at protecting their allies by taking a pounding themselves, right? And if that's the question we're asking, then I think this armored barbarian is honestly among the best tanks that I've built to date. They're going to be landing their soft taunts better than just about any other tank, thanks to their inherent advantage on attacks. More importantly, they're going to present a much more attractive target to the enemy than most tanks, thanks to the combination of disadvantage on attacks against anyone but you and advantage on attacks against you. And when those attacks do come, no matter what form they come in, whether spells, attacks, breath weapons, fire damage, weapon damage, radiant damage, it doesn't matter. To you, it's gonna feel like a tickle. And if your friends still manage to get themselves killed despite your best attempts to the contrary, no worries. This character can bring them back to life and patch them up between combats while they're at it. I would love to have this character tanking for me anytime. So that's the build for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. But more importantly, I hope you know how much I love you, because I really do. Thank you so much for all that you do for the channel, for liking and commenting and subscribing and even considering joining as a channel member. I hope you have a really great day and a fantastic week, and I hope that you stay safe and that you be good and kind, and that I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Right, I guess it might be a good idea to actually have a microphone. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Take a look in the 5 and 10, glistening once again, with candy canes and silver lanes aglow. It's lunchtime. I'm starving. And I apologize because I could have just cut this out. I didn't have to put this in the outtakes. But no, I'm going to make you watch. But our local grocery store makes the best chicken tenders. They're so good. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Soon the bells will start. But the thing that will make 'em ring is the carols that you sing right within your heart. My wife made me put up the Christmas tree like a few days ago, and it's November 8th when I'm recording this. But you know what? For some reason this year, I didn't mind. I don't know why. I also got some Brussels sprouts, which normally I love, but these ones might need to be cooked a little longer. Let's brain fart. Oh, it's getting dark. Daylight savings plus rain in November means it's getting dark earlier than I was expecting. Fortunately, I get to wash it down with the world's best kombucha. That's right, Colby's Scobies, as I lovingly call it, because it is my own special homebrew. Way better than any overpowered spell or magic item. La 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 la. After character level 5 anyway, at which point we won't be using it. Well, don't even say that. I'd probably make sure to grab... Don't even say that. I don't have time. Global reforestation. Wow. This one's a raspberry peach lime, and it is delicious and filled with probiotics to help keep my gut healthy and make sure that I have soft poops.